as this presentation will be available on our website, but if you want to email us at info@cleararmor.com, we can send you copies of the slides as well. Today we'll be going through 3 basic concepts. The fact that cybersecurity is not solely the CIO's responsibility, how to assemble an effective cybersecurity team, and then some smart practices to implement behind the scenes. So cybersecurity, as we keep saying, is not just the role of the CIO. It really needs to be a comprehensive concept that is applied throughout the organization. So shareholders and investors are expecting cybersecurity to be implemented at a high level and really to permeate the entire organization. They're holding senior management, C-level executives, and even the board of directors responsible for making sure that cybersecurity is effectively done throughout the organization. And in fact, not only is it happening at that lower level, but it's even happening at higher levels where the laws are changing and imposing obligations, including jail time, on senior and even some mid-level executives to ensure that this stuff is all done correctly. There are lots of risks and liabilities that can arise from poor implementation, and it's important to note that cybersecurity really is not just an internal IT systems issue. It's effective cybersecurity needs to be consideration across the boards, not only on your internal systems, but also for things that are customer facing, making sure that security is really baked in from the beginning. And what I'll touch on a little bit is the fact that security and privacy really go hand in hand. So not only do you need to make sure that you're having security properly implemented within any systems that you're developing, you also need to make sure that you're looking at privacy and not storing information that you don't need, making yourself a bigger target. So this, to really implement it properly, it needs to be a cross-disciplinary team-based approach. You really can't just have your network techs being the only people who are really thinking about and creating cybersecurity or implementing what I would consider a lower level cybersecurity. Otherwise, potential issues are likely to be missed. The threats vary widely, and you'll see that I have lots of information on the slides. As I mentioned, you can get copies of the slides from us, and they're really intended to be a reference for you for later if you find them helpful. So I won't go through every bullet point on every slide, sorry. So cyber criminals are looking to get access to your systems for a bunch of different reasons, including gaining access to your intellectual property, gaining access to third-party intellectual property. So a lot of times companies or other entities are getting information from the partners that they do business with. You look at what happened in Panama about a year ago, where it was a law firm that was hacked and they stole all sorts of information about leading government officials and made that public. So there's an easy way there. Sometimes if you can't get the information you want directly from a target, instead you look at who else might have that information and you get that information from them. So you really need to be careful and conscientious of the fact that even though you may be a small company or a mid-sized company and you don't think that you're a target, you actually are probably just as big a target as some of the bigger entities out there. And they're looking for information again, for a bunch of different reasons. They're looking for your customer information, including account information, banking account information, and for your individuals, the employees in your organization, for their personal information as well. Social security numbers in the US or other identifiers, a lot of basic information that you would keep in your HR records. They're also looking to get access to your systems to launch attacks against other systems, control your internal systems for their own computing purposes, and to use for ransom purposes, so to hold your data hostage or to take control of your building and automation systems for ransom. So this, as you can probably guess, this leads to a wide variety of losses. There are indirect losses, like just basic things. If they're stealing your IP, you lose your first mover advantage. You lose partner confidence and business reputation. If you're losing your partner's information, you've lost your reputation with them and you've lost a lot of their confidence. If you're losing customer information, you're going to lose customer confidence. And employee morale is actually a a really big one, that when you're the subject of a cyber breach, you do see morale and productivity losses. People are busy, people are running off in different directions, and they're not doing the company's day-to-day business. They're too busy trying to fix the problems. So there are a lot of intangible losses that a board of directors or other senior management may not think of. Typically, they'll focus more on the direct losses, the profits lost due to downtime because the systems are offline, or contractual penalties, or remediation costs of buying the credit monitoring services for the people that are affected, for example. But two things that may not come to mind that quickly for some folks are the government fines and court-awarded damages, and I'm going to touch on those a little bit more and focus. Some of these others are a little bit easier to predict or easier to quantify, so I wanted to touch on at least a couple of these government fines and court-awarded things. In the US, you have three basic categories of laws and rules and regulations that come into play. You have at the federal level, you have things like HIPAA, FERPA, and the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act or Sarbanes-Oxley Act. These are enforced by federal agencies, including Health and Human Services, the Department of Education, and the Federal Trade Commission. At the state level, every state has its own versions of these agencies as well. And many states have their own separate laws that you have to worry about. So when you have a data breach, you have to be very conscious of the fact that it's not just the federal law that you have to comply with, it's every person who lives in a particular state may be affected. And if you have information on entities outside of the US, for example, somebody who lives in the EU or Canada, you're going to be subject to an entirely different set of laws. So there's just a very broad range of things that can come into play. And then at the lower level, you even have self-regulation. You have industry standards like PCI, which is a payment card industry standard. And if you want to be able to take credit card payments, you have to meet certain PCI standards, or they will take away your ability to process credit cards, which is kind of a big deal for a lot of companies. There are industry groups like CyberSecurity and NIST, NIST being a federal government entity, but there are groups that really push for standardization or at least establishing what basic threshold security should look like, what a minimum level of security should look like. And so that information is out there and available. And what's nice about those things is that you have some industry experts who have really come together to create something that you can use as a baseline if you're new to cybersecurity or really trying to reevaluate your cybersecurity. This is a great basis for moving forward. So what I've found in the organizations where I've worked is that frequently cybersecurity is not something that senior management will pay attention to. It's, again, that the lower level techs are the ones who are responsible for it, and they just kind of write it off as a cost center and something that they don't really want to have to deal with at the management level. So what I've tried to do is provide, we all hear about the breaches at Home Depot or Target or some of the other TJ Maxx, some of the big ones where there are lots and lots of companies, lots and lots of people that are affected. But in a B2B, in a business-to-business type scenario, or for most companies, we're just not Target, Home Depot, et cetera. We're not at that level. And what I wanted to show was in these next couple slides are some examples of where mid-level companies, some of them are larger, but some mid-level companies are still being hit by the federal government and paying pretty significant fines. So one of the easiest ones to point to is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. Those are requirements here in the US that are on entities that have health-related information about subscribers or other participants in or patients. So if you have that kind of information, if your company is storing that kind of information, you are held to a higher standard. You are expected to meet certain basic insurance thresholds. So what you'll see is on the screen, there are three basic examples here. One was Presence Health in 2017. they were hit with a $475,000 fine for the loss of health insurance information for 836 people. That's the equivalent of over $4,000 per person that they had to pay. So it was a fairly heavy fine. Same thing with St. Joseph's Health. They agreed to a $2.1 million settlement, and they were also hit with a $7.5 million class action suit, which actually settled for $7.5 million, where they allegedly made public information available to search engines, so personal health information available to search engines. The University of Massachusetts at Amherst has a hospital where they had malware cause the disclosure of electronic personal information records for 1,600 people, and they had to pay fines of over $650,000. So these are not insignificant, and actually the only reason that UMass Amherst was what had such a low fine was that they operated at a financial loss. Otherwise, the regulators were expecting to hit them with even more significant fines. Switching gears, not everybody deals with healthcare information, so you would think that we're kind of in the clear and things would be easier, but that's actually not the case. And in fact, stupid, simple things that you may trip up on can cause significant problems. So there was a company, InMobi, who created a basic app framework for making smartphone apps. And InMobi published a privacy policy that gave certain assurances to people that used their services. Well, their developers weren't following their privacy policies. And so what people who used InMobi to generate apps found was that, in fact, there was lots of personal information that was being stored and transmitted back to their apps or to InMobi directly, things that they didn't expect and things that their end user customers weren't expecting based on the privacy policy. So simply because the developers departed from the privacy policy and didn't pay attention to it, InMobi was hit with a $4 million judgment that was suspended to $950,000, but only because InMobi argued that they were having financial trouble as well. And there were a bunch of hurdles that were placed in InMobi's way that if they don't meet those hurdles, they will be facing the entire $4 million. They also had to agree, among other things, to be audited every 2 years. And audits are not a trivial thing. You have it's a big resource waste. So it's something that you really don't want to be slapped with if you can avoid it. One of my favorites is actually Madison, just because of the subject matter of this one. They had promised people that they had a highly secure website and that they were storing information in ways that would keep their identities secret, when in fact, behind the scenes, they had no written information security policy, no reasonable access controls, inadequate security training of employees, no knowledge of whether third-party service providers were using reasonable security measures, and no measures to monitor the effectiveness of their security system. That is straight from the Federal Trade Commission. So they had made all of these big promises on their website and basically baited and switched everyone into believing that they had excellent security when in fact they had almost none. They were hit with an $8.5 million judgment that was suspended to $825,000, again because they had argued that they were in some significant financial trouble, which is interesting because there were other representations online more recently that seem to contradict that. So I'm curious to see what happens from the government's perspective. The states also hit them with an $875 million judgment that was also suspended to $825,000, and they're facing a $5 million civil suit here in the US. In Canada, they're facing a $578 million class action suit. They've also agreed separately to an agreement with the Canadian government and with the Australian government. I wasn't able to find statistics on those, but you can see that sometimes by just doing something silly like telling people, making a misrepresentation, and it's really not that silly, but making a misrepresentation about how your security is architected can come back to bite you pretty badly. So this is why I keep driving home that we need to make sure that we're doing things that take security and privacy into account. And again, it's not just at the federal level, you even have at the state level. California, for example, has at least two separate laws that deal with data privacy and knowledge and notification when a data breach happens. Comcast was hit just in the state of California with a $33 million fine, including $25 million in penalties and $8 million in restitution, because tens of thousands of customers had their phone numbers listed when they had told them that they wouldn't be listed. Same thing, California, again, $25 million in fines to Aaron's, which is a furniture and equipment rental company. They had rented out laptops with spyware on it. And so they were hit with, again, pretty nasty fines. Citibank, $420,000 in penalties and fees to California for not fixing its website. So the website had a known technical vulnerability that allowed 80,000 California account holders' information to be released. So it wasn't even that Citibank did anything really wrong. In the Comcast example, for example, they intentionally misrepresented what was happening with those phone numbers. In Aaron's case, they had intentionally put stuff on the laptops. In Citibank's case, they did not. This was just they failed to patch stuff quickly enough, and they were hit with a $420,000 fine just in the state of California. So how do you assemble an effective cybersecurity team? The cybersecurity team really needs to be a cross-disciplinary team. You can't just have your network people working on it. You can't just have any one group of people. It really needs to be a broad-based group to have an effective cybersecurity solution, to be able to ensure that the company is taking cybersecurity seriously. That means that you really should have someone from the board of directors. Unfortunately, a lot of the members of the board are typically not that well versed in technologies. They're more business-oriented people, but they can be trained. They are trainable. They're usually very intelligent people. So getting them up to speed, getting them on board with what's going on is really important. And there are tools out there, including the ClearArmor tool, that can actually help make that learning curve much shorter, much easier. We can help you push that data up to them and make it more ingestible and help them understand what's going on. Again, same thing with the senior management. A lot of CEOs are business-oriented, not technically oriented, but again, very intelligent people and trainable. And so making sure that you have at least one or two C-level executives, including the CIO, on the cybersecurity team, who are responsible for looking over all of the company's cybersecurity information is very important. Legal is a really important part of it from my perspective. There are a lot of legal hurdles that need to be overcome when a breach happens, and being sure that the company is positioned properly, that it's collecting the information that it needs to be able to meet all of its obligations on the back end is really important. So getting the legal team, and again, you're dealing with people who typically are not particularly technical, but they are, again, typically pretty intelligent and they're trainable. Contracts and procurement teams, they're the ones who are making commitments every day with your vendors or with your customers about what your security posture is and what the vendor's security posture is. So you need to make sure that you're not overcommitting or getting the vendors to undercommit or allowing vendors to undercommit to cybersecurity. Then, of course, you need the more typical folks, the information technology and the network engineering people. Those are typically two different groups in a large entity. So you want to make sure in bigger companies, you want to make sure that you're getting people who are representatives of both groups. Same thing on the development and engineering side. There are people who are building solutions that are getting information, and as we saw in Moby case, you want to make sure that the solutions that they are designing are actually in compliance with your company's privacy policies and with the company's information security policies. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for problems. Then the last group is audit and compliance. Having somebody on the audit and compliance team, if your company has one, having somebody from the audit and compliance team who is well versed in cybersecurity is very, very helpful. So to empower the cybersecurity team, they really need good information. Fundamentally, that's at the heart of all of this. They need tools which allow the members of the team to quickly assess the cybersecurity situation awareness and to drill down as necessary. So be able to track how many new machines are we seeing for some of the folks, the network folks, for example. They may want to be able to see and need to be able to see when new machines are coming online on your network. Why are they there? Are they authorized? Are they not authorized? Or for the IT teams, being able to see more what software is being installed. Why is it there? Who's installing it? How are people accessing the systems? Are there differences in behavioral patterns and things like that? At a higher level, those need to be aggregated together and made more digestible for the less technical folks. But those people still need to be able to see how many high-risk threats are we facing? How many medium risk threats are we facing today? And most companies are facing something. There's always some attack happening. Regardless of how big or how small you are likely under attack from at least one source. So making sure that they are empowered with that information is key. The other thing that the team needs is direct access to the senior executives and the board of directors. So you need to make sure that they're not afraid and they not afraid to take things up to management, and they don't have to go through several layers of management when a problem occurs, because once everything starts to happen, it happens very quickly and you need to be able to respond quickly. Having multiple layers of management in the way really can be a problem. And then you need effective and consistent communication tools. So what you want to ensure is that you have tools that everybody learns, everybody gets used to seeing certain reports. Of course, you're going to always add different things at different times, but there needs to be consistency in it. You need to be able to hear what's going on, and for the non-technical folks to really get that consistency so that they're not constantly having to relearn what the reports are and what the issues are. It makes it easier for them to understand what's going on. So we've put together some sort of suggested smart practices. A lot of these are in line with best practices. Some of them are concepts that are new, that are outside of the scope of some of the best practices as well. So fundamentally, privacy policies, as we've touched on before, they apply to all customer information and your internal information as well. So you need to make sure that everyone is aware of the company's privacy policies. It sounds kind of silly, but privacy by design really is a concept that needs to permeate the entire organization. Everybody has to understand that although it may be more efficient in some cases to have all the HR records on my laptop, that's probably not the most secure place for it, especially since I travel a lot. Keeping those on a central server, and it means that I won't have access to it while I'm traveling, or may not have it on the plane, but that's better than me having a local copy, which then if my laptop is stolen or lost, somebody else has access to, and now we've got a breach. So making sure that people understand these things is really, really core to helping reduce your risk exposure. And that's where having the well-balanced team really brings that to the front. And again, you get into the employee training, making sure that they understand all these issues, having written privacy policies. It's amazing to me how many companies don't have privacy policies, or they, as the first bullet says, they think that they apply only to the stuff on their website. But that privacy policy really is a corporate privacy policy. You need to review the design of your internal systems, again, for compliance purposes. Obtaining customer consent to keep information. This is a big one. So if you are going to keep any information about your customers, their names, addresses, phone numbers, you need to have their consent in many jurisdictions to actually have that. And when you get that consent, they are agreeing to your privacy policy. So you have to make sure that you are, again, in compliance with that and not using it improperly. And it's one of the big things to remember is that privacy policies, like any policy can change over time and should change because the law changes, the use that you have for the information changes. And so you need to make sure that you're updating your users and your customers and letting them know that you're going to be using this information in a different way, or that the law has changed and that these are now your new obligations with that information. Security by design is a similar concept. You need to make sure that you're building this into your organization. And again, this is where having a nice cross-disciplinary team makes this much more effective and easier to implement. You need to develop a corporate mindset, understanding that it's not an issue of when the company is attacked. Sorry, it's not an issue if the company is attacked, but when the company is attacked, because it will happen, and it's likely already happening. So you need to be very cautious and thinking through how the company is positioning itself and its information so that it's that you're limiting the risk that any attack poses. You need to compare your IT policies against industry best practices. So CyberSecurity and NIST, which I mentioned earlier, both publish really interesting tools and guidelines which you can compare your IT policies against, and you can actually check your systems for compliance purposes. You only really want to keep the information that's necessary and only for as long as necessary by reducing the information that you store. So having good information governance policies in place will significantly reduce your risk. If you don't need my bank account information, if you don't need my social security information, don't keep it. Or if you only need it for one transaction, only keep it for that one transaction. And then once that transaction is done, purge it, so that you're not making yourself any larger of a target than necessary. Now, you'll get a lot of pushback from marketing and from sales because you always want more information. They always think that they are going to need a lot of other information about people for various purposes, for data mining purposes. But there needs to be a pushback, and there needs to be a very thoughtful approach to the way that information is collected and stored. And again, you need to make sure that your information storage and retention policies, not only for that kind of information, but for any information, are being kept and adhered to very strongly, because otherwise you have problems. You have a lot of intellectual property that's sitting around that is valuable, and people forget about it. And there are multiple repositories, and so making sure that that information is, if not purged, at least brought together, consolidated, and protected appropriately is really key to helping reduce some of your risk. You need to regularly review IT security information. So firewalls, antivirus, and anti-malware are good, but is that your only? Is that really your only line of defense, or should you be having other things implemented within your systems? And if you're implementing something, intrusion detection systems, for example, within your environment, how often are you updating those for the latest signatures or for the latest trends that are happening in the cyber industry? So making sure that that happens, that those updates are happening regularly, is key. Visibility, at a minimum, the cybersecurity team needs to be able to see compliance information, so making sure that you're in compliance with the NIST standards, with CyberSecurity, that your systems are hardened, and if not, that you're documenting why, so that everybody in the organization sees it and understands it. Testing and retesting, that's internal testing and auditing, so making sure that your cybersecurity team knows what to do and actually has been through cyber drills to know what happens when a problem happens is really key. You'd be amazed at how many people will write up policies and they sound great, and then when something happens, they can't find the policy. Or the team members stumble over each other because they forget what they're supposed to do. So people need to understand where those policies are, they need to be readily available, and they need to understand their role in the entire process. So testing and practicing these things is really important. It can significantly reduce your risk exposure and your costs. And then communications is really the key. Making sure that senior management gets all of the information that it needs, because again, senior management really is the one that's on the line for all of these problems. If they aren't already on the cybersecurity team, as I mentioned, should really consider training at least one member of the board of directors in privacy and security, or hire a board member who has that training. One thing to note, some companies are pushing toward anonymization, and anonymization is great. It's a great way of taking personal information out of the data that you collect. So for example, cell phone companies collect signal strength and position data. And when they collect that, that actually has my phone number associated with it and my phone's ID associated with it. And so the phone companies will strip out that information to make it anonymous, so that they still have the GPS information and the phone strength information, so they can figure out where dead spots are and try to address them if they think it makes sense. Same thing with advertisers with cookies and things like that. There's a lot of information that you can collect, and then you can anonymize that information to still be able to do some of the data analysis that you want. That's a great, it is a great tool. Anonymization, it can be effective. Unfortunately, with big data, what you have to remember as you're anonymizing is that the folks who are hacking into your systems aren't just hacking into your system. They're hacking into other systems as well. And so if they can de-anonymize that information, because there are some consistencies in it, they have the GPS strength and they have a time, and they have a GPS position, signal strength, and time. Now I know where you were at a certain time, and if I have other GPS related information about you, I can cross-correlate those, or I can see movement patterns, and I can do different things to actually re-identify some of that information. So big data brings with it some additional risks. Being conscious of this as you're designing your systems, there are times where the risk is just unavoidable. But if you're conscious about how you're designing your systems, you can significantly reduce your attractiveness to hackers and significantly reduce your ultimate risk. Listed here some resources that may be useful to you. These include links to the NIST cybersecurity framework, a bunch of privacy policies and security templates, and other information that could be helpful as well. And that was basically it from my presentation for today. As a reminder, the slides are available if you want to email us. Otherwise, this webinar will be available online shortly. Thank you very much.